Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here, and we're back with our weekly Q&C&A&T videos. That's question, comments, answer, and talk, where we look at the comments on our videos and we give some answers, or we just use them as a takeoff point for talking about things that are interesting to us. This is Season 5, Episode 12, and our first question of the week comes from Dangerous Fahad, and they say, when will Survivor mode be fixed? Please tell the date.
All right, so the sad thing is, as much as we like to come across as not experts exactly, but we have a certain expertise in injustice. Yeah, but does anybody know when the date is? I mean, we were hoping that when they gave us the update, it would be fixed. Yeah. And it's sort of arbitrary, right? Because they can do it whenever. Mm-hmm. And I feel really sorry for those who don't have, on Android at least, who don't have the legendary gear sets.
Yeah, because some of them really change the way that you play, and some of them are kind of defining gear for doing well with certain teams.
Okay, but I want to say on top of that though, or think about it like this, because let's talk about the near term, because what you've got is this push and pull from people wanting to save their tickets for when the gears that they want are available, but then they actually are, if they're saving their last lap tickets, they're not getting augmentations. Right? So I don't want to say it's a near term thing, but not short term, because I don't know if you remember how long it took to actually get the rare piece in each set.
Yeah, it took a long time.
Yeah.
A lot of copies.
Yeah, exactly. But in the long term, actually, the augmentations are more valuable. I shouldn't say they're more valuable, but you'll actually be wanting more of the augmentations if you play long enough, because once you get one gear piece, you don't care anymore, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, and this is going to be an interesting example of people who talk about fighting fully maxed out metal characters and having trouble. Yeah. I mean, we're fighting fully maxed out metal characters here. Obviously, somebody's been hacking, but we'll see how the fight goes. Is it the metal
characters that are hard, or is it the Batman Ninja Batman with the decreased damage?
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, because it's not hard at all. I mean, I look forward to... See, here's a perfect example. I look forward to having astronauts so they can get a special 2 in and a special 1 without actually touching them at all. So I've given everybody a bar and a half of power. Here's the second bar of power fully, and I can usually keep on doing it until getting... Yeah, there we go. There's a third bar. And no damage, so I can just keep on doing this.
Oh, Blink, even better. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, Riddler's Cane. Oh, except she... Yeah. All right, so this was a bit of a mistake, because best is always to have Aquaman take the damage over time, because he can send it back. Ooh, that was a little rude. With the shield. Anyway, sorry. Yeah. So, and here's the thing too, on our current best multiplayer team, which you're watching right now, we're not using any Survivor gears except the Killer Croc companion gear on New 52 Superman, and Android is actually still giving that out now.
Yeah.
So it still makes... So for people who want to be complete, who have a different plan for their team, it makes a lot of sense to bank some last laugh tickets, so that when the gears start rotating at all in Android, then you can get the gears that you're missing. But that's really only true if they're fixing it soon, right? And at this point, what's everyone waited? Maybe a year? More than a year now, right?
Yeah.
Where there hasn't been a rotation of the gear set. Everybody who's been banking their tickets are missing out on augmenting their favorite cards.
And they're losing the ability to actually kind of play as freely as they'd like. Yeah, especially because it's like, at this point, it's hard to know what exactly you're saving it for. It's hard to know if there's going to be a payoff for saving it. Right.
And I hate that there's this kind of, there's these two sort of competing interests, and that people might be making the mistake and picking the wrong one and ending up having a really bad experience. Because I'll tell you what, like I said, this team fully augmented. None of the Survivor gears except the one that you can still get on Android anyways.
Yeah.
So I maybe a bit of advice then. That's also an A, answer and advice. If it were me and we still didn't have them all, I would still probably just cash out most of my last laugh tickets and maybe save at most 100 for when Survivor gets fixed on Android, because you can always build up more again, but that 100 makes you feel like at least that when it rotates again and you get the 2 weeks, you're going to have a chance at least at getting the ones that you want.
Yeah. So there we go. I think that's it for that question. The next question comes from Lisa Peacock, or I guess these are comments. See, I always enter them as if they're questions because I'm just used to it. But that's what the C's there for. It's for describing these situations. So Lisa Peacock, longtime fan, says hashtag BDCKR. I love you guys, and even though I don't play as much as I would like, I still watch you. And then later, as a comment on that, okay, so why grind when you can glitch? I've tried, and it's long and time consuming.
So welcome back, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
She's actually been around for the longest time. I think she was in the first year.
Yeah,
that we were doing this,
which is impressive. That's cool to have such a long time fan. If I remember correctly, she's the one who won our account giveaway when we
the one and only when we were actually really excited about the numbers and stuff.
Yeah,
before we got old and jaded. But no, I think it's a good point, right? Because the last time this is from the last Q&C&A&T, and we're talking about the gatekeeping stuff, but more actually about, you know, how much grinding do you really need to do? And I think Lisa would actually know, because I believe there was one season where she was motivated enough to get into and finish the season in number 3 spot.
Yeah, which is insanely impressive.
Yeah, that takes some real dedication and a lot of recharges, I think. Unless you want to spend that time, a bunch of your time changing over gears and stuff, right? And changing out teams. But yeah, you know what? I think you've got to really appreciate this game. You've got to grind at least some to really appreciate the game itself and the glitches.
Yeah.
Because if you don't use the glitches and it's all grind, it takes a very... I mean, some people will enjoy that anyways, but I think it takes a very specific type of person to play like that and not get frustrated.
Yeah, because I think at some point it's just there's diminishing returns. The amount that you get of new content for the amount of time you play is just really low, and I just personally don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, but on the other hand too, though, then you have to if you don't, I guess if you don't grind at all, you don't appreciate what you get. If you go straight to glitching or hacking, it's not... I don't know how you can have the same kind of fun, or maybe you can, but it just won't last as long.
Yeah. It's hard to enjoy stuff, and it's really easy to get overwhelmed by choice because it's not incremental, right? Basically, the way that the game doesn't give you too much to play with all at once is you have to earn every little thing that you play with. Right.
And then to me, the joy actually of the game is still the planning and thinking, all right, so what kind of combination? Oh, I was just on the Reddit for this recently, and people were just realizing, hey, with Harley Quinn and Tanty Totem, you can just do special 2s over and over again until you don't feel like doing it anymore, because she just gets her power back for healing your whole team.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of stuff is cool, but you can't do it unless you have Tanty Totem. Yeah. And you can't do it unless you have the characters you want to play with. And it becomes not such a fun team to play with if in multiplayer. That's not bad, eh? He only did a little rinky-dink amount of damage. Ares did. So it's an interesting game because the way they've made it, it's not nearly as fun as it could be.
And why do you say that?
Sorry?
Why do you say that?
Well, because can you imagine? All right, so imagine if we've been playing the game and we're still working on trying to augment the
earn stuff.
You want to play.
Okay, so you're saying the process of earning stuff isn't actually...
Yeah, because at some point when you've done enough of it, then you think, I don't want to do this anymore, but I still want to actually try out these new characters to see what they can do.
Yeah.
And if you're still stuck on the grind, at some point it's enough to kill the joy from the game, right?
Yeah, I think the grind is well balanced around the early game, but I think you're right. The late game definitely has some hiccups as far as fun.
So it's almost like it's building in its own kind of obsolescence if you didn't have, at least for me, if we didn't have the glitches to play around with to get us past that point, so that we have enough stored away so that if there's new content we can enjoy it. Except obviously not the metal characters. Right, so this is the problem. Oh, but he's Batman Ninja Batman's in the first place, right? He's the one that's potentially trouble if he ever gets outnumbered. But that's not the greatest strategy to have him in your first slot for your defensive team. Yeah. So it's interesting. So welcome back, Lisa. I hope you're actually enjoying some of the new content. And maybe this is, it makes a little bit of sense too, right? We've shifted. I mean, we still have plenty. The fact that we're playing some Ultimate Ladders right now,
Yeah.
is clearly tied to injustice, and that a lot of the questions have to do with injustice. But I think that if we hadn't branched out a little bit more from just straight gameplay and advice, this channel wouldn't have lasted either. Just like the game, it wouldn't have lasted if it relied just on that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there we go. Our next comment, this is from a while back. This is a comment that we were talking about, a bunch of comments that were memorable to us.
Oh, last week. I think I brought this one up last week, and I dug around and I found it.
Yeah. So this was by Mellow H. This is 1 year ago at this point. 1 year plus. I don't know exactly. That's just what
I
the
don't know how it
comment
counts.
says.
As long as it hits more than a year, right?
Yeah, so this is sometime in between 1 and 2 years, right?
Yeah.
And they say, "Hey BDCKR, I just wanted to say how much you inspire me to break the chains that I entangle myself to better conform to society. I know you may or may not see this, but I wanted to explain that for the majority of my early life, I was often bullied due to the fact that I spoke faster and used a more intense lexicon than the majority of students that surrounded the small portion of the world that I was involved in. Whenever I watch your videos, you inspire me to go and work out, as per your recent weightlifting videos, to begin to delve into a new book, or to just be myself in school in normal everyday life. I can't thank you all enough for appealing to my inner self and providing an atmosphere that inspires me to let it flourish from a seed deprived of nourishment into a strong, fully fledged flower. Thank you for everything, Marshall."
Yeah, and I think I said last time, this was one of my favorite comments, right?
Yeah.
And it touches on the idea of social media, which I treat YouTube as. I mean, as maybe not so much for people who are just watching, but for me, because we're making stuff, it feels very social, right?
For sure.
And I think one of the biggest problems with interacting like this on social media is how people feel disinhibited, right?
Yeah.
And they're willing to say things that they wouldn't say in real life. On the other hand, though, this is it's like you go to a job interview and they ask you, what's one thing, tell me one of your weaknesses, and you spin it into one of your strengths, right? Because it's a cliche, everybody expects you to do that.
Which is what you're not supposed to do.
Yeah, but so this is, in a lot of ways, it's also part of the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Because...
yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, you actually get to see people that are more like you than the people around you in real life. And if you don't have that kind of a rich experience where the people around you are actually pretty cool, then it gives you the chance to meet people that you couldn't otherwise reach.
Yeah, and that in itself is good and bad, right? Because it lets you find people who share your opinions, and that's not always a good thing. Sometimes you actually want your opinions to be challenged, and not in every case, but obviously in some cases, finding a group of people that are like-minded and allow you to be okay with what you currently are is like how good or bad that is largely dependent on what it is that you currently are, Like, if what it is that you currently are is racist, or just really hateful towards like another group of people, the internet also provides a space for you to find, oh yeah, there are people like me in the wrong sort of way, right? Like, I'm not the only one, right?
Yeah. See, this is all right. So this, and we've talked about this like recently. I'm gonna bring it up again too. Is conventions? It seems like conventions are like the internet, but without the bad stuff. Well, I shouldn't say without, because you hear a lot of. I've heard some stories recently about people who are creeping out at conventions and have to be booted out, or the convention doesn't do a good job of keeping their attendees safe.
Yeah.
But in general, it's like you don't get the same disinhibitions, but you get the same joy of meeting people who like the same kind of stuff that you do, maybe have the same sensibilities, and then you get to interact with them in a controlled environment. But basically talking, it's like having when you have a panel, it's like getting to sit in on a really smart conversation.
Yeah.
That's about stuff that you've already decided that you're interested in, because you've chosen. Oh, so if there's a couple of tracks, this is the panel that sounds like it's interesting. I want to be here and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, that's true. In some ways, conventions take away the anonymity that makes it feel so easy to be bad. Yeah, but I think definitely the internet is an interesting tool, and I think there's a lot to be said about whether it's inherently good, inherently bad, whether it brings out the worst in humanity, or if it just amplifies parts of humanity, you know, and like what it does. But it's cool that at least for most people, it seems that this is a positive space for people to engage in stuff that they like.
What was your favorite convention?
Probably the World Fantasy Convention.
That's an interesting bird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of big conventions that go around different places in the world that are that small. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I mean, and small is relative because there's still like 800, 900 people, but they cap the membership, and it's a cool kind of mix of professionals and fans where it leans more towards professionals than most conventions, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you like the best about it?
Oh, that's a hard question. Well, first off, what is your favorite convention? Give me a minute to think.
All right, so I think it's probably the World Fantasy Convention, but a close second would be Joe Walton's when she did Farthing Party.
Mm.
And it really is that, right? Because it's the interaction with people. It like I said, it feels like the internet without the anonymity and the bad stuff that comes with it.
Yeah.
And you get to meet interesting people and talk to them. And did I bring this up already? I might have brought this up on a video already, right? So, you know, we're remember that panel at Joe Walton's new one, Scintillation?
Yeah.
And we saw the good versus evil one, and it was really interesting. And then later in the day, there was Gaming is Art.
Mm-hmm. And
while you were going to talk to the woman who had worked on Watch Dogs
and the new Assassin's Creed game,
right? And I was just talking. I happened to recognize somebody who was from the previous panel on Good versus Evil. Mm. We started talking about stuff. You came back from that, and we were ready to go for lunch, right? Because we had a short period of time where there was maybe they didn't schedule any conventions or any panels for about an hour,
mm-hmm.
and we are going to run across the street to that really cool noodle place, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I said to her, hey, you know what? We're just going to the noodle place. I don't know if you got any plans. She said, yeah, sure. Why not?
Mm.
And so we all went for lunch, and we, you know, you just find out afterwards how interesting these people are and the kind of experiences they have, right? When they're policy analysts and they're teaching doctoral students at Oxford and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
really educated people with interesting things to say and opinions on those things.
And perspectives and experiences that just are completely different, right? So that she, you know, she goes to school with the guy who's advising the Prime Minister of Canada right now, right?
Yeah.
Like that was, I don't know. It's, I guess at a really big convention, you're still gonna meet interesting people,
mm-hmm.
but not in such a like an obviously kind of,
mm-hmm.
you know, I don't. What's the word I'm looking for? Like a revelatory way where you think, oh my god, like the stuff that these people
in like
do,
an intimate way.
Yeah, and it's so inspiring, right?
Yeah, yeah, for
and not
sure.
necessarily just the writers, because this I don't know if she's a writer or not.
I think she's like she was like a correspondent for the BBC and did a bunch of different stuff.
Right, she wrote for Slate.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I should probably say to anybody who's listening to us that if you get a chance to go to a convention for some fandom that you really like, you really want to take the opportunity, but also if you're going to go, take a chance, leave yourself out there, just talk to people.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the kind of things that you can learn in the kind of people that you can meet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so there we go. Our next comment comes from Drake Pendragon, and they say, the problem isn't that other people... Oh, this is in response to our thing of talking about fandom and gatekeeping.
Oh, gatekeepers, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a continuation of that conversation, which is important to know. The problem isn't that other people want to get into things that people like. The problem is when they get into something that you like and want to change it for the worse. Using your example of comics, there have been women in the comics industry for a while, and people didn't have issues with women enjoying comics. People like Ann Nesenti were awesome when they wrote, and she wrote Daredevil as the character that he was created as, and followed his regular character she added to him. She didn't alter him, but if there's a hole in the story, she could fill it in. Nobody would have ever made her quantify her love of comics. But when you get girls like Gail Simone, who are more concerned with their political agendas than creating quality comics, yes, real fans are going to be upset and make her quantify that she is a fan, because everything she has done has proven that she is not a fan.
Okay, so I like, even when I disagree with things, I like when people are engaged enough to really try to express themselves and put down how they feel about what we're saying.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing, though. So before you even get into it, I want to point out that that wasn't the point that we were making, although it's kind of adjacent to it, right? It's very similar.
Yeah.
So it looks like it, even though it's not. So, all right. So actually, so to make clear that we're not getting derailed or intentionally derailing it ourselves, maybe I should clear up the point that we were making, because I guess it wasn't clear enough. It's a fandom thing, right?
Yeah.
So where someone who thinks of themselves as a fan is challenging new fans, and that kind of gatekeeping where they're trying to determine just how much you have to like something or how much you have to know something before you're allowed to be a fan.
Yeah, and so I mean, when we were talking about, the people that we were talking about don't have any sway over the kind of content that gets made other than by existing and consuming content.
Right.
Yeah, so this wouldn't be somebody who's making like a larger scale change, and people like that still get regularly called out or challenged on whether or not they're a true fan, based off of arbitrary criteria.
The true fan, that's the thing, right? So to me, it's a hipster versus fan thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think I said this last time. The hipster is the one that's behaving like a gatekeeper, and they're making new fans feel uncomfortable because the new fan somehow doesn't have enough experience, hasn't liked it long enough, don't remember enough of
for some reason. Yeah, there's a right way to like it, and because the hipster came to it first, they feel like they get to decide that A, there's a right way to like this thing, and B, I know the right way to like this thing.
Okay, so maybe if I can find it, there's an XKCD comic I want to get people to take a look at. Maybe I'll put in the description, pause it here, and go.
Oh, the Lucky 10,000?
Yeah. Oh, you want to explain that?
Yeah, it's basically just like reframing your understanding of something in the way that you address people, where instead of when somebody doesn't know something, it's not like, oh my god, you don't know this, everybody knows this, how can you not know this? It's like, oh, congratulations, you get to find out about this today. You get that sense of discovery that I had when I first found this, and now somebody else gets to have it. And it's just kind of reframing your way of thinking, so that instead of it's like a, are you kidding me, that's ridiculous, you're ridiculous, it's like a, oh, awesome, you get this cool thing.
You're lucky.
Yeah,
you get to discover it for the first time.
Yeah.
Right. And so, all right, so what Drake is talking about here, it seems similar, but it's clearly not the same thing, right? Fandom does not need gatekeepers. If you love a thing, you can just love it, right? But professionals, there already are gatekeepers.
Yeah, whoever's employing them. In the comics industry, it's the publishers.
Right. And full disclosure, I used to read comics a lot until maybe the early to mid 90s, and I got back into it a little bit maybe in the early 2000s, just for a little while, right? And definitely not very much now. I remember Innocenti. The Daredevil run didn't stand out for me, but I remember she was the writer who did Longshot. I think she created Longshot. And I mean, there's a ton of women, maybe not a ton of, I shouldn't say that, but there's women who stand out who are very important in the industry, like Louise Simonson, who's the wife of Walt Simonson, who was a great artist, but she was a really great writer in her own right. Trina Robbins, I think, was part of, did she create Wonder Woman, or was she just really, I know that she was involved in that, but I think there's some doctor guy who gets credited for creating Wonder Woman. Maybe she was the artist, but there have been other women, but they were not nearly as well represented as maybe they are now. So I can't say I've read much of Gail Simone. Maybe that's wrong. I read Birds of Prey that she did, which I liked, and I think she does Deadpool. Does she?
Maybe she did Deadpool. I don't. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I don't really know.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing too. I don't know that I really care if she has politics, which is entirely beside the point of whether you can actually have any good stories that are truly apolitical, that have no politics in them.
Yeah, we were talking about this, and I think politics, especially as part of like a hero villain story, is maybe not strictly necessary, but important, because I feel like having politics, having somebody with goals and motives, and establishing what is good and what is bad, and a character's values is really important to like superhero stories, where you have a better character if you have one that isn't just good in because that's what they are. It's if you have a character that has certain values that they have determined to be good, and then you can have, you know, not just like this fight against some like something that is like pure evil, right? Like if you talk about like the basically excuses to fight something, like
creating conflict, like some reason to
if you have, instead of just like an excuse to fight something, like something pure evil, like I don't know, like goblins, right? Like you have something that doesn't really have any motivations, versus you have a character that actually has values and goals and motivations, and that's why they're fighting. And there's something about the conflict between those values and goals, where you talk about like characters like the Joker that are much more fully realized. And we were talking about it, we realized that the Joker is political. He's an anarchist.
Yeah, he is, totally, right?
Yeah.
And even if you don't go by the traditional definitions of politics, where there's some sort of description where it's reached broader appeal, so you can name it, that without that kind of more complex motivations, because I guess you could make more complex motivations, but it would be harder, even if you're not doing world building in like a science fiction fantasy way, but you're just using characters and having them play a role in your story. If they have some sort of motivation that's complex and is like absolutely apolitical, or just not political in a way that we recognize, not only does it become harder to identify with them, but it makes the story just harder to follow, right? It's another layer. It's like when people use like really funny language, as like you never read Butcher Boy, I don't think, Patrick McCabe, or just any kind of famous stories where they do weird things with language. It becomes another layer where you're I think more distanced from the character, so you can't really identify with them, like the way the most successful Marvel comics, right? Like Spider-Man.
Yeah.
When he first came out, you know, superheroes were superheroes, right? They were like when we were talking Golden Age, they were like heroes, like the stand on a pedestal, the sun shining out from behind you kind of guy. And Peter Parker was a teenager. He had his foibles. He had insecurities. He didn't know what he was doing. It's like Chuck, right? Like Chuck became. Remember the TV show we were talking about?
Yeah.
All right, so Chuck was so much more interesting as a fish out of water story than he was when he became confident. It just became a spy story where you either artificially made him incompetent, or you just had him being a spy and joking around.
Yeah.
And that became really tired. It wasn't nearly successful as when in the first couple of years, I think.
Yeah, and I think going back to the original comment, talking about somebody who's trying to make the thing you like worse, it's, I think, kind of a weird stance to say that somebody making content in a genre that you like, and the content is something that you don't like, inherently makes the genre worse. Like it seems like a really kind of odd argument to me, because, you know, there's like, sure, okay, maybe see, the problem is I don't know enough to know about how important the political message is in any of Gail Simone's comics, but I find it hard to believe that she is making what she knows to be a bad comic to further a political agenda, because that doesn't actually further a political agenda. Making something that nobody wants to consume, and then sticking something in that's meant to bring people over to your side doesn't actually do anything.
So let's say she is unsuccessful. I think there's potentially a fair argument to be made that if she spoils something so that it ends up dying, that's something that you can actually not appreciate. But here's my take on it, though. It's like you did last time, right? So I can see this part of the point, but this is my rebuttal of it.
Yeah.
If you don't like what she writes, you don't buy it. And here's the thing too. If the criticism is that it's changing and it's not a good story, I mean, that can't be the right argument, right? Because there's lots of stories when a character exists long enough, different writers are going to have their different takes, and so that's part of what revitalizes a character.
Reboots happen a lot.
Yeah, I mean, the example I'm thinking of is Swamp Thing. I mean, it is if Alan Moore hadn't come along, I don't think Swamp Thing would have had the kind of staying power popularity that it does now. So here's the thing: you don't like what she writes, you don't buy it. If you don't like what Marvel is publishing, you don't have to buy that either, right? Because what you're doing is because Marvel's the gatekeeper for Gail Simone. I'm assuming she's writing Daredevil now. Then this is one of the sort of perks, the features of capitalism, where if you don't like it, you don't buy it. If enough people agree with you, then the publishers will either they'll figure it out and start giving you what you want, or if they don't figure it out, then either somebody else serves that part of the market that agrees with you, and maybe it's a different writer and title that's with the same publisher, or maybe it's just another publisher, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, is it possible that the company goes out of business and then you'll never see that character again? But I mean, the biggest argument against that would be something like The Watchmen, right?
Yeah.
So I guess for people who don't know, The Watchmen was a story that Alan Moore wanted to tell with the old Charlton Comics characters, and then because DC had bought the rights to them, he thought he could do it, but then DC actually had plans to use them in their own comics, so they didn't let him use them in Watchmen. So all he did was create analogs of the same characters, and then he could tell the story that he wanted. And you can easily imagine, like, there's a whole bunch of, like, the obvious ones. Captain Atom became Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
The Question became Rorschach. And Blue Beetle became Night Owl. Those are the obvious ones. The other ones, I think, I'd have to look up and stuff. But those are the ones even somebody who was only, reading comics relatively casually could pick that up.
Yeah.
So the stories are still possible. I guess there's still the argument made that maybe you just like the characters and you want to do that, but there's going to be so many opportunities if they're popular enough, somebody is eventually going to write the story that you want to see.
Yeah. And
a Killing Joke.
Oh, that's true.
That was such a cool take on the Joker. That was new, and it was I don't know that you could say it was apolitical. There's definitely some interesting things there, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's interesting is, I mean, despite the fact that an artist doesn't actually necessarily have to be a fan of the content they're producing, even if they're taking on, like doing something on behalf of somebody else, I think it's totally possible. You'd look at like people like Harrison Ford, right? Where he's like, I don't think Harrison Ford is a fan of acting. Right? He's not a fan of acting, and I don't even know how much of a fan he is of his own movies. It's like a 9 to 5 to him, right? It's not like his dream job or anything. It's just something that he happens to be able to make a lot of money doing. So I think you can reach points where, it's possible that, you have like an artist or a writer or something who isn't necessarily a fan of comic books,
right.
but they're just good at it, and, they do it for the paycheck. But
I don't even know that that's possible. I don't think comics pay enough that it's actually worth it. Like, if you're really a good writer and you're a really good artist, but you don't like comics, I think you'd make better money somewhere else.
That's probably true too. But like even with that most charitable look, I feel like it's hard not to be on some level like a fan if you're making the content. Like if you are putting the work in to do it, I think it's really hard to doubt your chops if you're creating that content. And like, calling somebody out for being a true fan of the comic, I mean, even assuming, which I can't say one way or the other, but even assuming that Gail Simone totally doesn't care about comics and is just doing it for the message, it's really it's hard to say that they're not like engaging with the medium, right? It's like they're trying to do you don't go into comics to try to do a bad job and ruin comics for everybody when that's also your paycheck. Like people aren't like infiltrating comics to destroy it from the inside out by making that their livelihoods and then burning it to the ground a lot, or like around them, right? By doing a really, really bad job, because
like those hostile corporate takeovers where they're just going to break the company apart for pieces.
Yeah,
like that.
Yeah. So it's like, if you're really, really bad at your job, you get fired, right? And so I think the problem with that stance is that it has to inherently be an opinion, because obviously somebody disagrees with you, and some of those somebodies are her bosses, right?
So maybe I want to get back to the business part a little bit too, because I think the biggest thing that really undermines the arguments that you can actually ruin a comic book is that the comic books themselves now aren't their own thing. Disney owns Marvel now, and where the biggest money I think that Disney is able to squeeze out of the Marvel product, and Time Warner is able to squeeze out of DC, isn't from the comics anymore, because the numbers in terms of the issues sold each month, if you're looking at the numbers now, if the best-selling comics now, if they were around in the 70s and 80s, they would have been canceled for the numbers. Like, they just wouldn't, they would have been considered unsuccessful. They're basically ads now for movies. So they're like, you know, what are the biggest comics, right, that people have heard of? X-Men, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man. Is there any really popular Marvel DC comic now that isn't in production as a movie or a movie?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm speculating now because I'm really not as in touch with the industry as I used to be. You know, I used to read some of the trade mags too. Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think there's no big socialist agenda that's propping up comic book companies that have a message to tell that nobody wants to hear. So I think the best way, if you don't like Gail Simone, is just don't buy her comics.
Yeah, and I think you'd be hard pressed to argue that she's not doing what she thinks is best for comics.
Yeah, maybe who knows? Like, sometimes you can't tell the motivation for people, right? Some people aren't rational.
Yeah.
But I think this is one of those things where if there really is somebody who's not rational, it should correct for itself.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, it's hard to imagine a circumstance in which something doesn't come of it. I guess maybe people being angry online is that something.
Yeah, not if there's a bunch of people who aren't angry online who are still buying the comic. That's really the point.
That's true.
And watching the movie.
So there we go. It looks like we're at the end of our fights here.
Yeah, that was it. Oh, and we still have that one question. I still want to talk about flashlights eventually, and we still have that one question I think that needs its own time that we need to
actually answer properly, give its due diligence. Okay, we got to give a huge thank you to our patrons, and we also we don't have to, but we're going to let other people know how they can become patrons. You can go to patreon.com/bdckr, or you can click our face in the bottom right corner at the end of this video. If you
not our face, Lobo's face.
Lobo's face. That's true. It's our channel
like
icon.
That, Lobo.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But more importantly than maybe getting somebody else to give us a couple bucks is all the people who have already decided to do that. So a huge thank you to Console Peasant, Eddy G, and Edwin Felix, who are supporting us at the highest last word tier. You got iProphet, who is supporting us at the Your Message Here tier. And then we got Shawn, Farrell, and Daniel Simonson, who are supporting us on the credited level. Thank you guys so much. Your support really means the world to us. And thank you to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time. Komoda.